let's talk populist left, right? We know there's a populist right, right? Is there a populist left out there right now? I mean, I thought a lot of us who did the Rage Against the War Machine, which, libertarians are more conservative with their, economics for sure. But then there was an anti-imperialist leftist there. Is there a populist left of sorts that can unite with the populist right? I know the funny thing you're going to tell me as we get started here is like a lot of those groups that we're going to mention, those parties that you have articles on, you want to talk about, each one of those groups think that they are the populist left, believe it or not. Would you agree or disagree?
I don't pretend to know what people think, but
Yeah.
I do know what people
They act like it, like they're the populist left.
I know what people say and what they do.
Okay.
What I'm more interested in, I want to show. Yeah, all right, so let's talk about political organizations, and I'm not going to deal with I'm not going to deal particularly with Code Pink and one or two others, but rather the ones that are known to folks among the left, the communist and socialist parties. The Socialist Workers' Party, the Workers' World Party, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and CPUSA, Communist Party USA. And just I don't have an opinion about any of it. I'm just going to illustrate some things that come in the wake of this vote over the funding for Ukraine. I want to frame it with this: that tranche of funding for Ukraine is probably going to allow the war in Ukraine to continue past the election. I think that was the purpose of it. If you look objectively at the development of that war, there's no way that any amount of money given to Ukraine is going to beat Russia in that war ever. And so as Ukrainians die, and there's...
But Russia, why? Can you explain that real quick? I don't mean to take a detour, but why do they want, people have said this, that Kirby wants to make sure that war is going on through the election. How does that benefit Joe Biden? I mean, I know Mike Johnson says that he's a wartime speaker. And, Tom Hanks, what's his name? He said he's not a wartime consigliere now. Where are we getting at this? You know what I'm saying? Like, why do they want this war to last past the election? How is that beneficial to them?
They're in the war right now, and it's their child. So if the war isn't ongoing, that means it's stopped. If it's stopped, it's either because we lost, and you can't run. Hey, I started a war with Russia and lost. Vote for me, okay? Or we started the war with Russia and realized it was a stupid idea, so we stopped. Those are the two options, other than having it continue and just churn in the background and talk about abortion. That's their only move there.
I see what you're saying.
So the outcome of this is going to be either they stop it now, and they didn't for whatever reasons. They're going to continue it for this next tranche. This will run out at least past the election, and unless Russia turns up the heat, which is possible. There's some signs that they're doing that. Excuse me. If at the end of this we're in the same place where we have to acknowledge that using Ukraine as a proxy against Russia is not going to result in a military defeat for Russia. Mm-hmm. It's not going to result in a collapse of the Russian government or state. Then we either have to pull out, or we have to get more deeply involved and escalate it. And with that, you now look at, if we do that, do we still end up in the same place we're in, where we're going to lose it? Or maybe we provoke Russia into escalation and we end up in a world war, maybe a nuclear war.
Yeah.
Or are we successful in imposing a strategic defeat on Russia? And if we are, what happens? Well, the Russian nuclear doctrine is, if you threaten us with a strategic defeat, basically, that we launch. So that where we're at is trying to keep it status quo ante, or status quo, through the election. and then they're going to make a decision either to up the ante, or that was a
Right.
bad idea, but we got reelected anyway, and that's that's the development of that thing on its own track.
Got it.
Now, driving it though, you've got this group that has control of policy that believes they have to really negate Russia as a strategic threat and deterrent to their being aggressive against China. The people that had hegemony or thought they had hegemony in the world want to maintain and or extend it. And standing in the way is China.
Mm-hmm.
And standing in the way of them taking out China is Russia's strategic deterrent. When they drove Russia and China together, what they did was marry the world's second or largest economy to the world's largest gas station to power the economy that happened to be right next door, and nuclear umbrella to protect it. They have to take that apart, or they're going to be facing that global, they're facing it already, competitor. And I started to mention ECOWAS. We're seeing this develop already in places where you have a local revolution against French imperialism and or American imperialism in the form of AFRICOM in Niger, and then it's contagious. It starts spreading throughout that section of Africa. They start pushing back and forth demands by Paris and Washington, and attempting to stir up trouble inside those countries. And then all of a sudden you have high-level meetings with these African governments, with the leaders of these African governments, and Russia, with the military people. And you have, first you had that, what's his name, the private contractor training troops, and then you have, Russian advisors, to coin the CIA's term, folks in Kiev, in Africa. This will only grow. They're not used to dealing with this, okay? They haven't had to deal with this in 30 years anyway, and really in 50.
Yeah.
And now they're looking at dealing with it, not with a rural China where we have to be careful that 500 million Chinese people are going to come running at us with rakes and hoes and stuff, but rather the preeminent industrial power on the planet, China.
Yeah.
With its own spaceships and ICBMs and nuclear weapons.
In addition to that, right?
Unlimited capacity to produce weapons. If you listen to the last interview I did with Mark Sloboda earlier this week, it's on my YouTube page. He's discussing the material aspects of the war in Ukraine and the larger picture with it, which is that the weapons that are being consumed, blown up or used one way or another in Ukraine, and also that we saw in the Iranian attack on Israel last week or 2 weeks ago, these weapons such as Patriot missiles and mortars and things that are being launched by the Ukrainian government, the U.S. capacity to produce them with all of its allies is about 1/3 the rate that they've been used in the wars at the current level. The night of the Iranian attack on Israel, the defense, the Patriot missiles and whatever else they shot up, cost $1.5 billion.
This is getting like the fish that got away. I said $1 billion. Jamie said 1.2
$1.5 billion.
You're $1.5 billion. The next guy's going to say almost $2 billion. So go ahead.
Mark Sloboda said $1.5 billion, and he had some authority with it when he said it. Whatever
I got it. I know.
The drones and missiles that were launched by Iran, the total bill for that was under $100 million.
Yeah.
And so, and now what we're talking about here is if the U.S. can produce so many mortars or jeeps or tanks or whatever, let's say that the U.S. and Europe, which has been deindustrializing for the last 2 or 3 years now, and everyone else starts cranking out Jeeps and tanks and such,
Yep.
and then China starts cranking them out, and we're going to have a war of attrition. See, there's so many aspects to this that are very different with the China and Russia alliance. And when you take into that account also Iran and the rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia and the condition facing Iran, Venezuela, other oil producers, that Russia, and then China being a willing purchaser of all of it, and having the revenue stream because they're producing for pretty much the whole world, no matter how Western Europe sanctions or whatever, you've got this engine to develop the rest of the world, Latin America, Africa, the parts of Asia that are underdeveloped, plenty of it,
Yeah.
running full steam with a full gas tank and a nuclear umbrella.
Yeah.
And so it has to be taken apart. And the first thing you have to take apart, if you're going to engage in this kind of a struggle, is the nuclear umbrella. Because if you monkey with the other stuff and it gets too shaky, they launch. So that's part of the calculus here. I mean, that's the sort of global geostrategic context for all of this.
Yeah. There's a lot going on.
All right, so we'll talk about these. So you got 4 leftist parties in the United States, really.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I looked at the Socialist Workers' Party, the Workers' World Party, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the Communist Party USA. How did they see this vote to defund the Ukrainian war as of now?
Yeah, let's take a look at this. Right?
Because that vote was led by Republican members of the House that they call, and under all, the old designations, you would say these are right wingers, and they would identify as that too. But I'm basically suggesting that those labels are irrelevant when we're talking about a question of war and peace in the context I just described.
Mm-hmm.
Stopping the Ukrainian war will have an effect on this struggle between the United States and this rising multipolar alternative.
So you did mention about, how you talked about the way these 4 news outlets, how they handle this whole situation, right? Do you want to go into each one in particular, or do you want to just give a general consensus?
So the one that actually handled it,
yeah,
was
when you said handled it in a positive way.
No, that actually
talked about it. Okay,
yeah.
So you're saying none of these other PSL didn't discuss it?
No, not yet. Yeah. I mean, maybe tomorrow or the next day, but it's not there. And there was nothing in it in the PSL in the what is it? The Liberation News for the week, the days leading up to that vote. There was no obvious effort to organize a coalition around the anti-war vote that everybody knew was coming.
You said there was one network that did, right?
Well, that mentioned the vote. The only one that did was the CPUSA, and their magazine online is peoplesworld.org. It's the successor, they say, to the Daily Worker, which was the newspaper that the Communist Party used to publish for many years in the United States. And this article is titled $95 billion weapons bill will prolong deadly wars in Ukraine and Gaza. And so it goes through the votes and the mechanics of it. And it talks about Biden's war budget. And then it talks about prolonging the war in the East. And that's what this money is going to do. And how much of it's going to weapons. And then it says dissenting were 40 members of the MAGA faction, the House Freedom Caucus. And there were also, like I said before, there were 112 that voted no. So there were 82 more. Much of the liberal corporate media rushed to characterize their no votes as proof of the affinity for Putin that they supposedly share with Trump. In truth, however, with a close election coming, the Freedom Caucus is more likely attempting to opportunistically take advantage of widespread anti-war sentiment in the country and the reluctance many American voters feel when it comes to spending billions on overseas wars. Then they go through some data. Some 50% of Americans in one poll, including majorities of both Democratic and Republican voters, oppose allocating money for more weapons in Ukraine. Nearly 80% fear the war will drag on for years if there's no serious moves toward a ceasefire and peace negotiations. So then they quote Marjorie Taylor Greene, who says the days of the old Republican Party that wants to fund foreign wars and murder people in foreign lands while they stab the American people in the face and refuse to protect Americans and fix our problems are over.
But Don, we got to wrap this up soon, so we can't get too much more deeper into this. But the Marjorie Taylor Greene, Jamie, if you can get the picture of what they put up on her on, I think it was the New York Post the other day. So you saw the speech. We heard her speech earlier. Just take the picture and bring it up, Jamie. I mean, holy cow. When you're anti-war, right? When you go against the mainstream, I mean, look at this. Niet Moscow Marjorie, and they put the Spies Like Us Russian hat on her, you know? I
mean, you can buy those. If you go to
I have one.
Go to Borough Hall in Brooklyn in the wintertime, you can buy one of those for about $20. You might have to buy the medallion separately.
So those papers, those networks that you were just talking about, they all did go after Marjorie, though, right? I mean, that was the crazy thing, is that none of them mentioned the Ukraine bill, but just for her saying that she's being sympathetic to the Russians, it's the same treatment that Bernie Sanders got. It's the same treatment that Tulsi Gabbard got. It's the same, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't make a difference what side of the political spectrum you're on. If you're against the interest, that's what they do to you.
Yes. Just one moment further. The article in CPUSA's paper, peoplesworld.org, also mentioned Trump, and it said behind the scenes, he's already laying the groundwork to extend that war if he recaptures the White House.
Of course they did.
Whatever. So the others did not mention it at all. I then ran Marjorie Taylor Greene's name in the other newspapers, in the
and they all said something.
World and Liberation News and the Socialist Workers Party. Workers World and Liberation News both had articles about her, and I guess you go to those websites, you can see the addresses. One is workers.org and the other is liberationnews.org. Type in Marjorie Taylor Greene and you'll see how they treat it. But the most ridiculous one was the Militant, the Socialist Workers Party. This is the Trotsky faction.
It outdid Moscow Marjorie.
Yeah, well, yeah, not just that. They totally support Ukraine in that war. And they also completely support the existence of a Jewish state in Palestine. That, in other words, they are completely in the tank for what Israel is doing right now. And
final question. So we have all these outlets right here. We can see that they're just off the rockers. Even some of them even go and support what's going on right there in that country. Is there a populist left out there? When I say us, I mean anti-imperialists who don't buy into this stuff, free speech absolutists, want to free Assange, want fair elections. You know what I'm saying? Not necessarily buying into all the culture war BS. It's secondary to us. Is there a silent majority of a populist left out there who just want some, who believe in those values out there, who are understanding to, immigrants coming into this country, why, at least acknowledging why they're there? Is there a silent majority like us, a populist left out here that could kind of align on a lot of things that align with the populist side? Yeah, we'll have our differences at the end of the day, but are we out there? Is there a silent majority of us? Last question, Don.
They have to start with a strategic picture before you can start assessing tactics, even the tactical landscape. For example, let's say that I find a party that is completely opposed to war and wants to shut down the Pentagon, period. and yet almost every other thing, and say they're anti-abortion and whatever other horror, thing more horrible that you could find than that. You look at what's happening in the world and how society is developing, and it may be that there will never be a conversation about anything else unless the war is stopped now. And so, do you go into this party and bring everyone into it with you to stop the war and then settle these other things later? Or do you stand on the principle that I'm only going to go into a party that is anti-war, pro-abortion rights, that likes this particular aspect on this thing and this policy on that, no minimum wage, yes minimum wage, free housing, subsidize that, whatever. I have to have a match of all of these things before I'll join a party. There's going to be 5 other people in your party. If you're looking to electoral politics as a strategy, you won't even get signatures on a ballot to get on the ballot. And if you end up on the ballot, you're not going to win any elections. This political system here is designed for that. You have to build these coalitions with all kinds of contradictions in them, because this is something that can be handled by people who gatekeep who the candidates are. It's part of the mechanism of doing it, actually. Who the candidates are going to be and who's going to be in office and what the policy is going to be. If what you want to do is to settle some major you have to look at the world and see what is it that most needs to be done right now. I think what most needs to be done right now is demilitarization, stopping the wars immediately and demilitarizing the international scene. That has to happen first. That the United States, particularly as the preeminent, possibly sole imperial power on the planet, has to be forced to withdraw its occupation of the bulk of the planet. The 800 military bases that exist around the world are a military occupation of planet Earth. They are subject to rule from the Pentagon, which is subject to orders from the White House. That is an empire that is larger than any that has existed before, and the places in the office of the president, if not the person of the president, because of whoever is there or gatekeeps that office, more power than any person or any office has held in human history. That problem right now threatens our survival as a species. And if we don't address that, if we mentioning all this other stuff right now, I don't care how many people tell me I've heard this before. If you sit on your hands and don't solve this problem, it's going to solve you.
Got it. Don Debar, ladies and gentlemen. You good, brother?
Yeah, I'm good. Anyway, so
Yeah.
when are you coming up this way?
I don't know. I'll be up there sooner or later. I think I'm going to find out. I'm still waiting for an answer, but I got to go there and get that thing done in that thing that you did before. That guy and that other guy.
We talked to that guy about that thing?
That thing, right? You know, one of my favorite lines I've been hearing lately?
What?
Guy went to the doctor, gave him 6 months to live, couldn't pay his bill, gave him another 6 months. Love that one. Don, I've done 4 shows today. My brain is almost fried. I gotta get out of here.
I'm out too,
Thank
man.
you so much. I love you, Goomba. Thank you for coming on the show and spreading your
Jamie, take it easy, guys.
Your beautiful vision. Definitely. Say hi to Sammy for me.
I will do that. Later, guys.